You know, I once heard a young man say, "If I make it to 80, I'll be lucky." He said it with a kind of shrug, like the years after that were just borrowed time, time that didn't really matter. I remember chuckling to myself, because that's exactly the kind of thinking you have when you haven't lived long enough. But here's the truth, my friend. Living past 80 isn't just about luck. It's about the choices you make long before you ever get there. And if you're already in your later years, it's never too late to make adjustments that can change everything. Most people don't realize it, but rapid decline isn't some mysterious force that suddenly takes over. It happens because of neglect of the body, the mind, the little routines that once kept everything in balance. Now, before we go further, let me ask you something. Where are you joining us from? And if you find wisdom in these words, if they bring you even a little bit of clarity, a like and subscribe would mean a lot. Not just for me, but because it helps bring these lessons to others who need them too. Now, let's get into it. The first measure to prevent rapid decline after 80 is something I've seen ignored by so many people. People who were once sharp, strong, and independent, but over time became frail, forgetful, and lost their sense of self. It's movement, not just exercise, movement. You see, when we're younger, we move without thinking. We walk, we bend, we stretch to reach things, we lift bags, we climb stairs, we shift our weight when we sit down. The body is in motion constantly. But after 80, people start avoiding movement. They stop bending down to pick things up. They sit longer. They shuffle instead of walking with purpose. They start believing they're too old to do certain things. And that's the beginning of a slow decline. Here's what happens inside the body. The less you move, the more your muscles weaken. The weaker your muscles, the less stable your body becomes. And when your stability goes, falls happen. And when falls happen, confidence is lost. That's the downward spiral right there. The trick is, you don't need to be lifting heavy weights or jogging down the street. No. That's a mistake people make. They think movement means intense exercise. But really, it's about keeping the body engaged in daily motions. There's a man I knew, old farmer, lived well into his 90s. Every morning he had a routine. He'd go outside, touch his toes, slowly, but he did it. Stretch his arms out, and walk around his yard a few times. Nothing fancy, but he moved every single day. And let me tell you, at 90, he still had the posture of a man in his 60s. Then there was another fellow I knew, used to be strong in his younger years, but after 80, he let himself slow down too much. Stopped doing things around the house. Started avoiding going outside as much. Let others do things for him that he could have done himself. His legs weakened. His balance suffered. And in just a few short years, he couldn't even walk across a room without help. The body is like a tree. It either grows strong or it withers, depending on how well you take care of it. So what do? You move every day. Even if it's just stretching in your chair, lifting your legs, rotating your arms, you have to engage your body. That's the first measure. And don't fall into the trap of thinking you're too old for this. No one is too old to move. Even people who are bedridden can do simple exercises. It's about what you still can do, not what you can't. There's a secret here that most doctors won't tell you, because medicine focuses too much on treating problems instead of preventing them. Here it is, your fascia. That's the thin layer of tissue that holds your muscles and organs together, needs movement. If you don't move, the fascia tightens, and when it tightens, you lose flexibility. You feel stiffer, and everyday movements start becoming harder. That's why so many people wake up in their later years and say, "Why does my body feel like this?" It's because they let themselves get rigid. But the good news is, the body is more forgiving than you think. Start moving today, even in small ways, and it will respond. Here's something you can try right now. Lift one leg off the ground while you're sitting. Hold it there for a few seconds. Put it down. Now do the other leg. Feels simple, doesn't it? But if you did just that 10 times a day, your legs would stay stronger. You see, wisdom isn't about knowing complex things. It's about understanding simple things deeply. And this is one of those simple things. Move, or you'll lose your ability to move. It's that straightforward. Now, movement is just one piece of the puzzle. There are 4 more measures we need to talk about, and each one is just as important as this one. If you ignore even one, you'll feel the effects. So, take this first lesson to heart. Start paying attention to how much you move in a day. Make it a point to stand a little more, stretch a little longer, take a few extra steps. This isn't about staying fit in the way young people think about it. It's about keeping your independence, your strength, your dignity. You know, when you talk to people who've lived a long, strong life, you start noticing a pattern. It's not just about what they did with their bodies, but how they used their minds. And that brings us to the second measure you need to take if you want to avoid that slow, painful decline after 80. It's this: never stop learning. Now, before you brush this off, thinking this is some advice about reading books or doing puzzles, let me stop you right there. This isn't about forcing yourself into some kind of mental exercise just for the sake of it. No, no. This is about keeping your mind engaged with the world, staying curious, and continuing to challenge the way you think. I've seen it happen too many times. Sharp, intelligent people who, as they age, stop engaging with new ideas. They settle into the same routines, same conversations, same habits. At first it seems harmless, but over time, it does something to them. Their world shrinks. They become disconnected from what's happening around them, and before long, they lose that spark, the one that keeps a person alive inside. You see, the brain is like a river. It needs to keep flowing. The moment it stagnates, things start growing in it that you don't want there. Forgetfulness, confusion, even depression. It's not because of age alone. It's because the mind wasn't used enough. I knew an old man once, well into his 80s, who had the sharpest mind I'd ever seen. You could talk to him about anything: history, politics, the latest technology, even modern music. You'd think he was a man in his 50s just from the way he spoke. So I asked him one day, "What's your secret? How do you stay so sharp?" And he laughed, real easy, and said, "I never stopped being interested in life." And that's the key right there. He never let himself stop being curious. He never believed that just because he was older, the world had nothing new to offer him. Compare that to another man I knew, someone who, by all accounts, was a smart fellow in his younger years. But as he aged, he let his world get smaller and smaller, stopped keeping up with things, only talked about the past, stopped learning. And by the time he was in his late 80s, you could see it. His mind wasn't there the way it used to be. He still lived, but it was like the light inside him had dimmed. That's why I tell people, don't just exist, stay engaged. Now, how do you do that? Well, let me tell you, it's not as hard as people make it seem. First, start asking questions again, like a child does. When you hear about something new, some technology, a new trend, even a strange word you don't recognize, ask. Look it up. Try to understand it. You don't need to love everything about the modern world, but you do need to stay connected to it. Because the moment you start thinking, this is all beyond me now, that's when the decline starts. Second, talk to younger people. You'd be surprised what a conversation with a grandchild, a niece, or even a young neighbor can do for your brain. They see the world differently. They challenge the way you think. And that's good, because every time your mind has to wrestle with a new idea, even if you don't agree with it, your brain grows. And third, find something new to figure out. It doesn't have to be anything grand. Maybe you pick up a new hobby, like sketching or learning to cook a new dish. Maybe you start keeping a little journal, just to put your thoughts somewhere. Maybe you finally learn how to use that smartphone properly instead of avoiding it. The point is, your mind needs fresh material to work with. Now, I know some people will say, "Oh, but I'm too old to learn new things." Let me stop you right there. That is not true. There was a woman I met once, 86 years old, never touched a computer in her life. But one day, she decided she wanted to learn how to send emails so she could talk to her grandkids. Everyone told her, "Oh, it's too late, don't worry about it." But you know what she did? She learned. Took her some time, but she figured it out. And by 90, she was not only sending emails, she was even learning how to use video calls. And you know what that did? It kept her brain alive. She was learning, she was laughing, she was staying connected. You see, the real danger of aging isn't just the body slowing down, it's the mind closing up. And when that happens, people don't just get old, they start fading away. But if you make a decision right now, today, that you're going to keep learning, keep questioning, keep your curiosity alive, then your brain will stay strong. And that means your spirit stays strong too. Now, this isn't just my opinion. Science backs this up. Studies show that people who continue to engage in new learning after 80 have a lower risk of dementia, better memory retention, and even longer life expectancy. Why? Because the brain is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it stays. So here's something simple you can do right now. Think of one thing, just one thing, you've always been curious about, but never really took the time to learn. Maybe it's a bit of history. Maybe it's how a certain machine works. Maybe it's a word you've heard but never understood. Whatever it is, take 5 minutes today to learn about it. And then do that again tomorrow and the next day. Because small things add up, my friend. And before you know it, you're not just getting older, you're growing wiser. Now, we've covered 2 measures so far. First, movement, keeping the body active so it doesn't wither. And second, keeping the mind engaged, always learning, always questioning. You see, I've met too many people who, after a certain age, just start withdrawing. They don't mean to, but it happens. Friends move away, or worse, pass on. Family gets busy. Maybe health issues make it harder to get out like they used to. And before they even realize it, they've become isolated. And let me tell you, isolation is just as deadly as any disease. People don't realize this, but loneliness does something to a person. When you stop talking, when you stop laughing with others, when you stop sharing moments, your spirit starts to shrink. And when the spirit shrinks, the body and the mind follow. There's a reason studies show that people who maintain strong social connections live longer, healthier lives. It's not just about feeling good, it's about staying alive. Let me tell you a story. There was an old woman I knew, must have been around 85 when I met her. She lived alone after her husband passed, and over the years, she became quieter, more withdrawn. She told me once, "I don't want to bother anyone. Everyone's got their own lives." And that's the mistake so many older folks make. They think that because they're older, they have to step back. They feel like they shouldn't impose on younger people. But what they don't see is that connection isn't just about receiving, it's about giving too. One day, a neighbor's young daughter started visiting her. Just small things, asking her about old recipes, listening to her stories. And you know what happened? That old woman came back to life. She started cooking again. She started telling stories, laughing, even dressing up a little when the girl was coming over. That little bit of connection brought back a purpose in her days. Now, compare that to another man I knew. He lived to 92, but the last 10 years of his life? Completely alone. He didn't want to trouble anyone, he said. He was fine by himself. But I'll tell you the truth, he wasn't. He stopped talking as much. He stopped feeling as much. And by the time he passed, it was like he had faded long before his body gave out. That's why I tell people, don't let yourself disappear. I don't care how old you are. You need people. You need laughter. You need conversation. You need moments where you feel like you matter to someone. And if you're watching this and thinking, but I don't have anyone anymore, let me stop you right there. Because connection doesn't have to be family. It doesn't have to be old friends from decades ago. It can be anyone. A neighbor, a cashier you see every week, a younger person who could use some advice, even a pet. Yes, pets count too. The trick is, you have to take the first step. You have to pick up the phone. You have to say hello. You have to step outside and make small talk with someone. You have to be willing to engage, even when it feels like the world has moved on without you. Now, I know some people don't like to admit they're lonely. They say, "Oh, I like my quiet. I enjoy my own company." And that's fine, to a point. But let me tell you, even the most independent person still needs someone to share their thoughts with, to laugh with, to sit in comfortable silence with. And you don't have to be a social butterfly. You don't have to be at parties or meet new people every day. But you do have to make sure you're not closing yourself off. Here's something simple you can do. Think of one person, just one, that you haven't spoken to in a while. Could be a friend, a relative, an old neighbor. Give them a call. Not a text, not an email, a call. Because hearing someone's voice, feeling their presence, even through the phone, does something that a message on a screen can never do. And if you don't have someone to call, then start looking for small ways to engage with new people. Go to a local community center. Join a small group, even if it's just for a hobby. Or, if mobility is an issue, try online groups. Because in today's world, you don't have to be physically alone to be connected. Now, here's another thing most people don't talk about: the importance of giving. One of the biggest mistakes older people make is thinking they don't have anything left to offer. They think, "Oh, I'm retired, I don't work anymore, what do I have to give?" Let me tell you, you have wisdom. You have experience. You have stories. And that is worth more than you realize. Younger people need it. They need to hear about how life was before. They need to learn patience, resilience, the things you can't just Google. And if you start sharing what you know, whether it's how to fix something, how to cook something, how to handle life's struggles, you'll see something magical happen. People will listen. They will value you. And in that, you'll realize that aging doesn't mean fading. It means becoming something different, something just as important as before. So, here's the lesson for today. Stay connected. Reach out. Keep yourself engaged with people, even in small ways. Because a life lived alone, that's not really a life. And if you're watching this thinking, maybe I should call someone today, let me tell you, yes, you should. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Because these little connections, they're what keep the heart beating strong, even in the later years. Now, we've talked about movement. We've talked about lifelong learning. We've talked about connection. Each one of these is a pillar that holds you up as you age. But there's something else, something that, if neglected, will make all the other measures harder to sustain. And that's nutrition and hydration. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh, here we go again with the diet talk. But listen to me carefully. This isn't about some trendy diet, and it sure isn't about depriving yourself. This is about understanding how food and water become even more important after 80. See, when you're young, you can get away with bad habits. Your body is forgiving. You eat poorly, you bounce back. You don't drink enough water, your energy dips, but you recover. But as you age, your body stops bouncing back the way it used to. And most people don't realize this until it's too late. I've seen it happen, strong, independent folks who after 80 start feeling tired all the time. They think, oh, it's just old age. But in reality, they're dehydrated. They're undernourished. Their bodies are running on empty because they haven't been giving themselves the right fuel. Let me tell you something most people don't know. By the time you feel thirsty, your body is already dehydrated. And as you age, your sense of thirst diminishes. That means even if you don't feel thirsty, you still might be running low on water. And you know what happens when you're dehydrated? Your muscles weaken, your joints stiffen, your mind gets foggy, your energy disappears. And the worst part? It increases the risk of falls. How many times have you heard about an older person falling and never fully recovering? Well, guess what? Many of those falls happened because they were dehydrated. Their muscles weren't responding quickly enough. Their balance was off. So what's the simple fix? Drink water every single day. Even if you don't feel thirsty, make it a habit. Have a glass of water with every meal. Keep a bottle nearby. And if plain water doesn't appeal to you, add a little lemon, drink herbal tea, or even eat more water-rich foods like cucumbers and oranges. Now let's talk about food. I'll tell you a hard truth. Most people over 80 don't eat enough protein. They start eating smaller portions, skipping meals, or relying too much on processed foods because it's easier. But listen, your muscles need protein. Your brain needs healthy fats. Your bones need vitamins and minerals. I'm not saying you need to eat like a bodybuilder, but I am saying you need to be mindful of what you put in your body. You don't need fancy meals. You just need to eat real food. Vegetables, eggs, fish, nuts, beans, simple home-cooked meals. And if you struggle with appetite, try eating smaller meals more frequently. Because let me tell you, when you nourish your body properly, everything else gets easier. Your energy improves. Your mind stays sharper. You feel better. And feeling better is the key to staying engaged with life. Now let's move on to the final measure, the one that ties everything together. And that's having a reason to wake up every morning. Let me tell you something most people don't realize. Purpose keeps you alive. You ever notice how some people seem to decline right after they retire, or after they lose a spouse? It's not just the loss, it's the sudden absence of purpose. You see, when you don't have something to wake up for, something to look forward to, something that gives your days meaning, you start to drift. And when you start to drift, your body follows. Now, purpose doesn't have to be some grand mission. It doesn't have to be a big project or something complicated. It can be anything that gives you a reason to get out of bed. Maybe it's tending to a small garden. Maybe it's writing down your life stories for your grandchildren. Maybe it's volunteering, even if it's just making phone calls to check in on others. Maybe it's learning something new every day, or simply being the person in your family that others come to for advice. The point is, you need to stay engaged with life. And if you don't know what your purpose is anymore, create one. I knew a man, 87 years old, who told me, "I don't have much left to do. My kids are grown, my wife is gone, I'm just here now." I asked him, "What do you love?" He thought about it and said, "Well, I always loved fixing things." So you know what he did? He started fixing little things around his neighborhood. People would bring him broken lamps, old radios, even simple stuff like chairs that needed tightening, and he'd fix them. He told me later that it gave him a sense of usefulness again, a reason to keep going. And that's the secret, my friend. You have to find something that keeps you looking forward, no matter how small it is. Because once you lose the will to engage with life, the body and mind start shutting down. So let's bring this all together. We've covered 5 measures to prevent rapid decline after 80. Movement, because if you don't move, your body will wither. Lifelong learning, because if you don't challenge your mind, it will slow down. Social connection, because isolation kills faster than age. Proper nutrition and hydration, because your body can't function if you don't fuel it right. Purpose, because if you don't have a reason to wake up, your body will stop trying. These aren't just theories. These are lessons from real people who have aged well. People who stayed strong, sharp, and full of life long after 80. And the good news? It's never too late to start. So if you're watching this, ask yourself, which of these 5 things am I neglecting? And whatever it is, start today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today, because time is precious. And the choices you make now will shape the years ahead. And listen, if you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. What's one thing you do every day to keep yourself strong, sharp, and engaged with life? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this video gave you even a little bit of wisdom, a like and subscribe would mean a lot, not just for me, but because it helps share these lessons with others who need them. Remember, aging is not about just getting older. It's about staying alive in every sense of the word. So keep moving, keep learning, keep connecting, keep fueling your body, and most importantly, keep waking up with a purpose. Because the years ahead, they're still yours to live.